We are once again coming around the corner for the patch day, and this time we're moving into 10.8. Riot's kept some sneaky stuff in their back pocket about a lot of the systems changes to League, so let's go over exactly those. Make sure you smash that like button, destroy the sub button, and let's jump right in. Naturally, we're going to be covering the most important and major changes at the very front of the video. The first thing that Riot has decided to tackle on their list for this patch is funnel changes. They are literally seeking out every single funnel that exists online and in real life, and they are seeking to destroy it with the laser beam of death. Seriously? This change is insane. Not only are they increasing the gold penalty even more compared to before, but now it goes away at minute 20 rather than minute 14. This is an insane nerf to funnel. The issue is, Riot seems to be taking the wrong approach to this. Many famous players and streamers have shared their opinions on this, and none of them seem to align with what Riot is doing. They just keep pushing back the window, but that doesn't necessarily nerf the people who are already strong at it, because there's value elsewhere in the abilities they bring. We'll have to see if this actually removes funneling from being a viable strategy. My personal guess is no, but at the end of the day, we'll never know until it actually goes through and we see it happen. Nerfing funnel isn't the only thing that Riot has done on this patch in regards to systems outside of champions though. There is now home guards in the early game when people die, so those inters on your team can feed just a little bit faster. Riot has also changed the kill experience, implementing a 20% penalty to assist experience and a 20% bonus to solo kill experience. And these are both reduced to 10% once you hit level 7 and 8, and after that they go back to normal. And when you combine the home guard and the experience changes, there'll actually be a drastic difference in how solo lanes fall behind. You'll probably notice people getting way out leveled in solo lanes, but if they get camped by a jungler, it's not going to be as bad, because the jungler on the flip side of things will be losing experience compared to somebody who just tries to farm, and that's even more so considering that Riot is also buffing jungle experience at later levels and making it easier for people to farm by making jungle items heal you more when you're at low health. All of these changes combined are definitely going to shake up the dynamics of the game as they are right now. People will definitely be more poised to solo carry if they're absolutely destroying their opponents in a solo manner. Maybe now you can actually go 1v9 even if you have a bunch of feeders on your team. That wraps up the big changes that apply to everybody though, so now let's jump into the champion changes, and the first one up is that Aphelios gutting that we saw a preview of on our PvE sneak peek video. The first change is that Aphelios no longer gets bonus armor penetration in his stats. Instead, he gets lethality, which absolutely wrecks his scaling against people who stack armor like tanks and the more tanky bruiser style champions who build health and armor and magic resist items after maybe 1 or 2 damage items. But Riot did not stop there. His Q now also scales slower. It used to max out at level 9, but now it maxes out at level 13. And if this already wasn't enough of a train wreck to you, they're also nerfing all of his scaling on his Q so that it actually scales the ratio 2, meaning in his early levels his damage will be absolutely pathetic. At this point, Aphelios could even take some tips from Soraka. Maybe throwing bananas would be more effective than using whatever he has now. Moving on from the absolute trash fire of Aphelios' nerfs, let's talk about the buffs to Orianna. Right now, her W speed and slow are increased, which lets her kite insanely hard, especially against melee champions who dive on top of her, where she'll be able to E herself and then W, hitting both the enemy, slowing them down, and speeding herself up. And speaking of Orianna's E, that also gets a buff too. The shield AP ratio goes up, making it even harder for damage to stick to her and her allies, especially as the game goes on, when she starts stacking ridiculous amounts of AP. This is just a pure buff at all points of the game and will make Orianna a very convincing pick for the top tier. And speaking of buffs that will put people in the top tier, let's talk about the Tristana changes. Her E ratio goes up. Thankfully, not as insanely high as what it was on the PvE last week, but it still goes up to 150% bonus AD and makes Tristana's all-in ridiculously strong, as if it wasn't already strong. You ever just barely survive a Tristana's all-in at level 6 or maybe level 9 when she finally gets her E-max? Yeah, say goodbye to that, because that's not happening anymore at all. Don't forget that this also has synergy with Press the Attack, as the higher damage will be able to be amplified even more because it's higher in the first place. And it would be dumb if I didn't mention the fact that Tristana's E could be used on towers. This lets her push even faster, and it also applies to minion waves as well. At this point, it should be becoming pretty clear what's happening with the AD carry tier list come this patch. And the changes to AD carries don't stop there, although this one is kinda more oriented towards mid and top lane, as it's a nerf to Kalista. Kalista loses 2 armor early, and this might seem like a small amount, but remember, every point of armor that you have means a lot when you only have a few. That is several percentage points of damage reduction that you lose out on. Kalissa's going to be taking more damage in all-ins, on harass, from minions, towers, everything that you can think of. And not only that, they also nerf her E-slow. It gets absolutely obliterated. It's a 10% rank 1 slow, which is seriously pathetic. This completely destroys her ability to kite and chase people in lane and will likely make it so that she's no longer viable as a solo lane pick. And while we're on the topic of ranged top laners who are really annoying to deal with, Urgot is also getting buffs. His E now properly gets movement speed on the dash, which will really help out a lot and makes it harder for people to avoid him. And the CC duration is also bug fixed, properly lasting 1.5 seconds. Now while that's all nice, it doesn't necessarily directly improve his combat, right? Well, Riot took it one step further and reduced his ultimate cooldown at rank 1 and 2. 20 seconds early on off of your ultimate is incredibly powerful, especially when you remember that he can execute people with it. At this point, a level 11 Urgot right now on 10.7 has about the same ulti cooldown as a level 6 Urgot will on 10.8. You know, looking back on it now, it seems like Riot really has a thing out for ranged champions on this patch because Xayah is also getting changes and she is getting a pretty significant buff. Her E damage per feather hit is increased, and overall this will have a drastic impact when you have large numbers of feather groups hitting people. You see, the damage per feather is reduced by a percentage, and they made it a 5% penalty now instead of a 10%, which will result in a much higher amount of damage overall. While it doesn't seem that game breaking, those really sick Xayah flash plays where you hit somebody with like 12 feathers might just one-shot them, and it's definitely enough to bring her up a full tier on the tier list if it performs as well as it looks like it's going to. And the next change on this absolute roller coaster of a patch is to another ranged champion where Varus's R cooldown is nerfed, going up at early ranks. And this might seem pretty small, 20 seconds doesn't seem that bad. However, you have to remember, this is the only way that Varus has to engage on a fight and to peel people away from himself. His E-slow is strong, yes, but will that stop somebody like a Jarvan or a Jax from diving on top of him? No, no way. And the last major champion change that we're going to be looking at is the Evelynn change, where her Q damage goes up by 15 at all ranks. Her Q cooldown is very low when she uses it, especially against jungle camps, which means that this will speed up her clear significantly and help her fight. Remember, every single second of advantage that you can get in the jungle is really important, as it's the difference between getting somewhere and not getting somewhere in time for a gank to work, for a kill to be gotten, for an assist to happen, whatever it might be. And so if this speeds up her clear even by just 3 or 4 seconds, that's huge. The last thing we're going to be covering under our major changes is the quality of life change that Riot has added to a bunch of ability timers, indicators, and bars on champions whose abilities buff them so you can more clearly see how long they last and when to reuse them. They added effects for a lot of champions, and there will probably be more in the future, but for right now there's stuff added to Camille, Alawi, Janna, Jax, Lux, Nocturne, Swain, Thresh, Varus, Vi, Draven, and Gnar. This tool is really important because it can help you learn, and after all, you're here because you want to learn about the patch and learn how to get better and improve at League. And to find even more resources for improvement, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. Seriously, we have tons of guides up there on everything from macro, micro to champion-specific guides, lane-specific guides, generic tips, ways to practice, just about everything that you could need to work on, improve, and review we have done by challenger-level content creators. And we're always working on getting more and better content out there for you guys with our creators so that you can learn even more and improve. Now, with all the big stuff out of the way, let's cover the more minor changes that will have impacts but aren't gonna really make or break some champions. First up, Ashe's Q attack speed goes up significantly in the later ranks of the ability, making her scale better and feel even stronger when using her Q. The problem here is that Ashe doesn't max her Q until she hits level 13, and so until you hit level 10, where you actually get a third point in your Q, you're only really feeling a 5% increase in your attack speed up until that point. Most of the time, games are really in an awful spot by then if you're losing, and that extra 5, 10 to 20% attack speed isn't gonna change much. If you do manage to get there without much of a hiccup though, you'll definitely be feeling the increased attack speed once it's maxed out at level 13. Following up those attack speed changes with yet another change to attack speed, Master Yi's R attack speed gets decreased by 5% each rank, which means you're gonna feel it more in the late game when people won't really melt quite as fast as they used to because you're missing 15% attack speed. However, at that point, usually Master Yi is already unstoppable when he starts hitting that really late game, full build, level 16, so it is what it is. probably won't end up being that big of a deal, and of course, this isn't that much of a nerf to anything like Tariki Funnel. Next up, Set is getting yet another change as Riot feels as though he isn't quite in the spot that he needs to be, and here Set's W base damage goes down at all ranks, scaling up to 30 less damage at max level. Will this change much? Probably not. He's still got a ton of power to work with. He does percentage max health damage, he still has a huge burst of true damage, he's still got his R for amazing CC, a massive slow, his E for follow-up CC. At that point, missing 30 damage, you don't feel so bad. I guess Riot just doesn't really know how to feel about Set being played in literally every role in every lane. People have played him support with Omnistone, they've played him top lane, they've played him jungle, some people even play him mid. He can do just about anything and stand toe-to-toe with just about everybody. And let me tell you, if you think 30 damage off of his W is gonna do very much, well, that's a load of barnacles, alright? Moving on to another S champion, Soraka gets a mana buff, putting her at 425 starting mana. This means that she'll be able to get a couple more spells in, but not only does that happen, she also gets a Q buff. Her mana cost goes down by 15. Overall, the ability for her to get more spells out and throw out more Qs is nice, because if those Qs hit, then that means that she'll get a lot of extra health. The only problem is that that's a big if. If you're missing the Qs, nothing really changes there. And now to complete the trifecta, we have yet another S champion getting a change, and Senna is getting her passive nerfed once again, down to 22% Wraith spawn chance on minions that she doesn't kill. This will end up factoring in and giving you about a soul every minion wave, which is pretty slow if you aren't doing anything else. If you happen to be playing Senna or see somebody playing Senna and they get 3 souls from 3 minions, well then you know they're cheating and you should report them. And once again, as we come to the final champion on the minor changes, the champion who gets the least significant change once again for I believe the 3rd patch in a row is Ryze. Ryze gets some very minuscule base stat changes, but outside of that, his Q movement speed is going up a pretty decent amount, more so early than it is later. Again, this won't do much for anybody outside of the very, very high elos where people have already mastered him and abuse every little piece of movement speed that they can get. This isn't going to change him into some random 60% win rate monster, so don't really expect too much from this change. Being able to abuse tiny changes like that is something that's pretty important, but not a very common skill. And if you wanted to learn something like that, well then you should absolutely go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have guides specialized to champions that can teach you how to take advantage of unique mechanics like that and get the very most out of them. And if you can do that, then you could apply that to all the games that you play in the future, no matter what champion you've learned. All of our guides are made by challenger level players, and we're always working on making more and better ones for you guys so that you can improve and win your games. And of course, we don't just have champion guides, we have guides on just about everything that you could need to learn about League and improve your gameplay. From macro guides to micro guides, like the champion specific guides that I mentioned earlier, basic ways to practice, skills that you need to learn, and more are all up there for you. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole video. What do you guys think of the new patch? Again, I think Riot is actually doing a very solid job this season ever since about patch 10.5. They're really nerfing the champions who are too strong and trying to buff the ones that are weaker, and they're trying to go for that middle ground that they talked about a couple years ago in how they changed their philosophy of balance. We'll have to see if they keep it up in the future, because there's definitely more champions that they need to tone down a notch or are way too strong. But for now, as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.